Hello. Some years ago, one glorious summer's day on the anniversary of the outbreak of the First World War, I had the good fortune to be at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. This was Queen Victoria's seaside home, a place chosen and largely designed by Prince Albert. It was an ideal retreat, far enough away from London and the smog of the city to allow his family some privacy, but close enough to allow the Queen to continue her duties. Prince Albert loved the place from the first time he saw it, even before the house was built. The view, he said, reminded him of the Bay of Naples, and when I arrived, one summer evening, I understood exactly what he meant. In the afterglow of an immense lightning storm, I arrived by boat in Ryde. The sun was glistening on the Solent, and as I walked up the hill to my hotel, everything was quite misty in the early evening sunlight as the rain evaporated. Never in my life had I had such a sense of coming home. The following morning I arrived at Osborne House before the official opening time, and I sat on a bench by the old cottages, once inhabited by various members of Queen Victoria's family and entourage, and I imagined the day when Princess Alice, Queen Victoria's second daughter, and her new husband, Louis of Hesse, rode out of those gates on their way to their honeymoon. At length the gates opened, and as I walked into the grounds my heart was pounding with every step. The loveliness of the place, the sense of timelessness and also of times long ago, the whole atmosphere of Prince Albert's beautiful dream, which seemed to have imbued the entire place with his essence. Every tree, every leaf, every blade of grass, every inch of the grounds seemed to speak of the halcyon days long before the First World War. I was instantly reminded, too, of Queen Marie of Romania's descriptions of the place, which she had so often visited as a child, coming to see her grandmother, Queen Victoria. Osborne, she wrote, the very name is still a joy. It meant summer holidays, it meant the sea and the seashore, it meant wonderful shells to be found when the tide was low, shells of every colour and shape. It meant glorious bathing when the tide was high, and drives in the big wagonette, as we called our break, through the sweet-smelling woods, past hedges full of honeysuckle. And it meant dear old Grandmamma Queen in the background, Grandmamma Queen at breakfast, under her green-fringed parasol, surrounded by dogs, Indians, Highlanders, and also an aunt or two in nervous attendance, or occasionally a curtsying lady-in-waiting in correct black, all smiles with the mellowed voice usual to those who served or attended to the great little old lady. It also meant the beautiful terraces in front of Osborne House, where the big magnolias grew against the walls, those giant magnolias which had a lemon-like fragrance and in which you could bury your whole face, but which you never dared pick because they were far too precious and exotic for childish plunder. Even when faded and their petals had turned to a sort of leathery brown, they still kept their delicious scent. And then their curious hard-pointed centres became very prominent. They really were mystery flowers, as also were the passion flowers with their cross at the centre, and the many stamens laid flat in a perfect circle like the wheels of a watch. There was also jasmine on those terraces, and jasmine has always filled me with a sort of ecstasy. Many years since Queen Marie of Romania last visited, I still felt the same ecstasy that she had felt as I entered the house. Each room and creak of the floorboard, each portrait and view from the window played on my heart in a way I cannot begin to describe. You could almost hear the voices of the people who had once lived there. If ever an atmosphere were embroidered into the fabric of a building, I think it is so true of dear Osborne. On the anniversary of the outbreak of the First World War, there was something particularly poignant about being in the room where Queen Victoria died, on the arm of her grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. In spite of the way in which history has so unjustly maligned the Kaiser, he never had any desire for war. He loved his grandmother, and he loved England too, and to the last minute he and Tsar Nicholas of Russia were doing their utmost to prevent war. The room was a sad reminder, too, of the way in which Prince Albert's dream of Europe united through family ties had come to such a terrible end on the battlefields of France, Belgium, and the Eastern Front. Outside, in the grounds of Osborne House, stands the little Swiss cottage imported by Prince Albert as a playhouse for his children. Outside the Swiss cottage 9 little gardens are laid out in rows. 9 little spades, 9 little wheelbarrows, all the implements used by those children to grow flowers and vegetables, which they would then sell to their father, Prince Albert, at market rates. Inside the cottage are small cooking utensils and ovens, where the children learned to make meals to entertain their parents and the children of servants and guests. It's also symbolic of how Prince Albert decided to raise his children. Not only were they to be equipped to live independent lives, but also they were to understand that privilege implies service, and with all their status and the benefits of their position came great responsibility, something that each of his 9 children seemed to understand. While I was visiting the little Swiss cottage, a rather strange and lovely moment occurred. There, where so many of Queen Victoria's children and grandchildren had played, I was walking along the balcony that surrounds the building. Below, out of view but within earshot, some German children were running, and I heard them call to each other, "Schnell, schnell," and something indecipherable to me, but I understood it to mean that their parents were calling for them. In that moment, in those little children's voices, I thought it could be any time, any era. The era of the little Prussian or little Hessian grandchildren of Queen Victoria. When I descended the staircase, there was no sign of any children, German or otherwise. All I knew was that I had never felt such an overwhelming sense of the timelessness of everything, such nostalgia for something that in this life I have never known. Leaving the place, I was reminded too of the words Queen Victoria wrote many years ago in describing the house. Osborne, she wrote, is really too lovely. Charming and romantic and wild as Balmoral is, there is not that peaceful enjoyment that one has here of dear Osborne. The deep blue sea, myriads of brilliant flowers, the perfume of orange blossom, magnolias, honeysuckles, roses, etc., of all description on the terrace, the quiet and retirement, all makes it a perfect paradise, which I always deeply grieved to leave.